I was killing myself, literally. Forget about performance and all that stuff. I'm like, how did you survive doing that stuff? I really don't know how I made it to where I am now with that lifestyle.
Your glucose levels will impact your performance. High insulin levels leading into a game are going to reliably induce a level of variability and unpredictability to what's going to happen in your glucose levels.
Before the game, that's where it gets super interesting. And Andrew has helped me create this schedule, and it's changed my life. It really has.
One of the biggest mistakes that people with type 1 have when they are an athlete, particularly on the top end, is there's this central idea of what you have to do because everyone else has done it. But the rules are totally different in type 1 diabetes.
He taught me things that I wasn't aware were possible. We're trying to eliminate the two things that are the biggest variable for my performance as a type 1 diabetic. So what do? Night before a game,
So let's say Briswald Family Adventures. They said, awesome podcast. We are in California, so love our hockey and Max. Or no, in Canada. I said CA Max, so I was confused. I'm from America. So I was like, oh, they're from Canada. What does that have to do with hockey? Or California has to do with hockey. All right,
we got 3 NHL teams in California. Come on. San Jose Sharks. Can you name them? Can you name all 3?
Anaheim, San Jose Sharks, because I never knew they existed until you just said that. And hold on. No, don't tell me. I was going to say Knights, but it's not the Knights. That's
Vegas. You're close. It's along the same lines of a Knight. It was a little higher than a Knight back in the day.
Kings.
There you
Boom,
go.
LA Kings. So I got it back. So just a little bit of assistance,
a little bit of help. Well done.
All right. So they said my 17-year-old son with type 1, or my 17-year-old type 1 diabetes daughter plays ringette in soccer. I'm not familiar with ringette. Maybe you are. And has been
ringette. Yep.
And has been eating mostly low carb since diagnosis at 12. We get lots of people who question how she can play sports without eating super high carb. Wondering if you can touch on what you would eat game or day to day, and especially on game days. So I'll actually leave that to you to kind of touch on the game day stuff.
Wow, this is a good one. It can take many turns, so this is going to be a good test for me and Andrew. Stay locked in here. Fantastic question. My cousin growing up was pretty good at ringette. I personally have only played it a couple times. I'm not very good, but so ringette is basically hockey without a blade on the stick. It's kind of similar to like lacrosse, like field lacrosse, like in terms of you got like the people playing defense and the offense, and it's like you don't go on both sides. And you stick the stick, like the shaft of the stick, in a little ring, and you play with that instead of like it's a hollow ring instead of a rubber puck. Essentially, it's a great sport. Very, very cool. Anyways, first of all, I commend you guys for understanding that that's the proper approach at such a young age. Well, I mean, at an early stage of getting diagnosed. And I say that because I certainly didn't have that approach when I got diagnosed. My parents, it's not their fault. It's just they weren't given the information that they probably should have gotten. I never went low carb at the start. I just tried to do the same thing that I was doing, which essentially was, as a hockey player, the old school approach of the old chicken parm with spaghetti and like basically carb loading, essentially. And my parents were both terrified of me going low. And my dad was my coach, so he was super strict on that. Like, if I went low or even remotely close to being low, he was cutting me off. And I didn't want to miss a shift, growing up, obviously. So that was always, I just ride high, and I got so accustomed to playing at numbers that are so astronomical. I don't even want to share on here, but like insane things that you wouldn't expect someone to be able to function. I was playing in a hockey game. So looking back, I'm like, man, I was probably playing at like 5% of what my capacity was. I still did all right though. Worked out. Could you imagine I was dialed in back then? Who knows? And you know what? I'm saying that all because we didn't have the information that is out there. There was lots of books that I wish I knew, but they were around back then too. Obviously, I mean, you guys have access to it. So whatever you're doing, keep doing, because it seems to be working. My issue was I didn't understand that was a legit option, because everyone in my sport as a whole is very much so in the old school mindset, right? Like they think that you need the carbs to have the energy to play a full 60-minute hockey game. Um, and I'm going to let Andrew elaborate on that once I'm done answering your question, because he's been doing it for longer than anyone in the world, basically, with this control. So he'll elaborate on the whole keto thing and why it is attainable and why it is something that works for us, both as a ringette or soccer or hockey player. So Andrew, you take that over once I finish answering the rest of this question, because it's super important for me to say. I fought the whole thing of like, okay, you can have whatever you want in modification or in moderation. My entire life as a type 1. I literally just ate whatever I want whenever I wanted. And my approach was extremely detrimental to, I mean, what would happen on the ice, because I paid for every mistake I made. And I was just like, it's fine. I'll go high. I'll just give myself insulin. And then as Andrew talked about earlier, his fluctuation was much smaller than mine, but I'd go up here and then I'd crash. And then I'd be, okay, don't worry, smash candy, back up. And then insulin, boom. And that was my whole life. And I just got so used to just grinding every day like that. And like, I knew how bad it was for me, but now I look back, I'm like, dude, what were you doing? Like, I was killing myself, literally. Forget about performance and all that stuff. I'm like, how did you survive doing that stuff? I really don't know how I made it to where I am now with that lifestyle. But I'm very lucky because I made it through some tough spots. And now I'm here to tell you that you're doing the right thing. And I actually ended up gearing more towards that because of the guy on this podcast. And that's why we have this podcast, is because he did change my life for the better. He taught me things that I wasn't aware were possible. And hockey is such a unique sport, just as ringette and so is soccer. But for me, Andrew touched on it just before this with the previous question. We're touching basically every aspect of exercise. You know what I mean? We're hitting the anaerobic system. We're hitting the aerobic system. We're going max effort, max strength, max speed, like across the board. A little burst here and there, and then you're sitting there for 20 minutes and then you do it again. But then a practice is something that's totally different. Your heart rate might not get fully up to your max heart rate for the entire time. You might touch it once in a while, but it's more like here, you know what I mean? So a practice for us is very different than a game. And a game, if let's say, just to keep it easy, you're playing 20 minutes a game. I don't play 20 minutes a game. Not always. I have a couple times, but the big dogs play 20 minutes a game, but just to keep it for whole numbers. So if you're looking at 20 minutes of activity out of this 60-minute game, which with TV timeouts and all that stuff, you're looking at about 2.5, 3 hour time period. You're only on the ice for a total of 20 minutes on the high end. Okay. So how do I prepare for that? You know what I mean? It's so challenging to think of, because you want to be in a spot where you're allowing the fact for that little buffer of the different energy systems to tap into that to make you go low. Then Andrew talked about the fans and the hostile environments and all this stuff, the travel, like that's all going to have an impact on it. Right. So when it came down to it, the reason why I'm telling you all this is all those variables are quite frankly out of my control. It comes with the territory of being an NHL athlete. And there's nothing I can do about it. And I absolutely love it. So what is in control, what is in my control is what I put in my mouth. And if I can understand that there's a huge consequence if I don't put the proper fuel in at the proper time and the consistent discipline of eating those same things in the same time on a game day, it's a crapshoot. Anything can happen. And I got away with it at a young age because the selfish approach was like, I'm not hurting anyone but myself, and I'm cool with it. Like I get to play hockey. Like I never let that in. But when you get to the pro level, the guy next to me and the guy across from me, his livelihood depends on me being there to back him up. So it's not about me, it's about them. And unless I was able to really let that in and change my approach, I would never have survived in the NHL. So it became around the clock for me, 24/7 preparation. And Andrew's original advice, he probably doesn't even remember this, but I tell everyone now, my preparation for my game, when does my game start at 7 o'clock on Saturday? It actually starts 7 o'clock on Friday night. Everything I put in my body, whether it's food, it's hydration, it's the insulin that I'm giving myself, the type of insulin, where I inject the insulin, the stress, it could be getting yelled at by someone, it could be lack of sleep, I could be sick, all that stuff. You have to take care of that stuff that you can control, which I get most of it you can't, but the stuff that you can, you have to dial that in 24 hours leading up to when you're going to play. Because when that puck drops or the ringette thing drops or the soccer ball whistle is blown to begin the game, it's now you just got to play. There's going to be things that happen in that game that are also out of your control. You might not play as much. You might play more. You might get a penalty. There might be something like you might get injured or whatever it is. If your preparation isn't impeccable leading up to that, your ability to work through those random things that are thrown at you in that 60-minute game, for me, it's not doable. It's astronomical. It's your performance is going to be like supremely depleted. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm kind of blabbing on a little bit, but it's something that I get so excited and so passionate about because I wish I had the information that I do now when I was a kid. I would have had such a different approach. But as I said earlier, I'm where my 2 feet are and I don't live in the past. I learned a lot about what not to do. And Andrew has helped me create this schedule, whether it's a practice day, a travel day, or game day. And I try to abide to it like by a T. And it's changed my life. It really has.
Yeah, one of the and we'll kind of I actually want to circle back to this because I want to ask you a question on this, Max. I think directly to what they're kind of getting at here is one of the biggest mistakes that people with type 1 have when they are an athletes, particularly on the top end, is there's
Yep.
this central idea of what you have to do because everyone else has done it. But the rules
Correct.
are totally different in type 1 diabetes. And that is not what most people realize is they're like, oh, I need to do what this other person's doing. Well, you don't, no. You have to do things very differently
Yep.
because when you go into a game, you want to reduce, or an athletic endeavor, whatever it might be, you want to reduce the variables of uncertainty and inconsistency. And to put it very simply, high insulin levels leading into a game are going to reliably induce a level of variability and unpredictability to what's going to happen in your glucose levels. And any
Bingo.
athlete with type 1 diabetes will know that your glucose levels will impact your performance. So, if we were to put the science hat on for a second, we know that levels of glucose, even at 160 milligrams per deciliter, let's say that's like 7-8 millimole for someone else, that from different units, that alone there's evidence that shows that prevents your ability to clear lactate. So you build up more and more lactate. So people probably have heard of something called lactate threshold. You build up more and you can't release as much. We know that even subtle elevations in glucose maintained at similar levels will prevent the body from tapping into other fuel sources. So let's say, like Max says, he has all these different energy needs in a hockey game. And a lot of other sports are that way. If you run high glucose levels during a sport, which many people do, and most guidelines recommend people do, only to mitigate hypoglycemia, then what ends up happening is that you're locked in to having to use purely glucose because that high glucose levels is actually signaling the body to force what they call glycolytic pathways. So you can't tap into fat as readily. You can't tap into other fuel substrates. You're basically metabolically inflexible during exercise, which is the exact opposite of what you want. You want to have maximal metabolic flexibility because if you're locked into glucose use with type 1 diabetes, that's the one fuel substrate your body lost the ability to do automatically. And so you're locked into a fuel that your body can't automate anymore. And so obviously you could probably tell this is problematic, but what you can do is to reduce that incidence of uncertainty and lack of consistency is to reduce the one input prior to performance that has the biggest variability, and that's insulin. So if people go into a game and they down, let's say you mentioned pasta, or someone has all these like typical pre-exercise carbohydrates, the problem is that the amount of insulin will be magnified by the exercise, the intensity, and the duration, all in uncertain amounts of amplification, but that leads to huge variability. So if athletes can go into exercise and be prescriptive and strategic about the amount of insulin they're doing with the nutrition they're having, with the preparation they're having around it, they can dramatically reduce the variability at the most important time, which is when they perform. So this idea that people need tons of carbohydrates as well has led many people, especially in type 1, to feel like, oh, I need to, like you mentioned, carb loading. There's this concept of glycogen loading. There's this concept of high carb oxidation, improving efficiency during exercise. All these things, Max, are, we've done studies in Ironman competitors, in a whole different array of athletes. And what we have consistently found is that the type of diet you're on, as long as you're on it for long enough, your body will get used to that fuel source and will be able to perform. So we've had people.
I was just about to ask you a question on that, not to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's say someone that is on one of those things you just referred to as carb loading, etc. What is that process like? Because I know the answer to this because I experienced it and you've taught me all about it. But for the people at home, can you just tell them how long it takes to go from X to Z or Y to Z?
What, you mean like as far as carb loading, Max, or are you referring?
No. So like, let's say, okay, we are on I'm on a carb loading diet, or someone watching is on a carb loading diet, and they believe that that's their primary source of fuel.
Okay.
We decide, okay, we just listen to Max and Andrew's In Range podcast. Wow, that seems super cool. Max blabbed on about a bunch of random stuff, and Andrew backed it up with some legit science. It sounds like it's legit. Let's try it out. How long would that process take to go from this to that? Because I certainly experienced a bit of like a grind for that, and it's enough to throw someone off of something good. And I don't want you to get discouraged if it's difficult. So can you just give some insight into that and what that conversion of, lifestyles would be like going from something that isn't keto to keto?
Yeah. So, and that can apply to actually any diet, to be honest with you.
Cool.
I now understand what you're talking about. So what you're asking is, how long does it take for someone to adapt to a new nutrition strategy?
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. So typically we have seen that when you go from something like the traditional higher carbohydrate based strategy in athletics or in the general population, and then you switch over to what is, let's say, this other extreme. This is use these extreme examples, which is these very low carbohydrate approaches. These are two extremes, and it's a great way to explain this question. Well, when we've done studies in athletes, what we have found is that athletes who are competitive, actually, and competing in high level athletics, it takes them around 4 weeks to normalize performance after the diet's initiated. So everyone thinks that you have to have high carbs to perform. We have found that as long as you adapt to a diet you could have basically near zero amounts of carbohydrates, at least 50 grams or less, that you perform exactly the same, even doing max effort sprints.
Is that the cutoff, 50 grams of carbs?
It's totally dependent on each individual. So athletes can get away with more. Yeah, because when people think of the amount of carbohydrates they need to get into a ketogenic diet, I guess is what you're probably asking.
Correct.
That is based on the production of ketones, and the amount of ketones you produce are highly individual. So it seems like males produce or have lower levels compared to females. People with more muscle mass tend to have lower levels versus those who have less. People who are obese tend to have higher levels than someone who's lean. And so it seems like those individuals who tend to be able to utilize more of different fuel substrates, so they're more metabolically flexible, so to speak, which is where the muscle mass comes in, which is where the higher activity level comes in, which is where those who are obesity have less of that. You tend to use all of these different substrates more efficiently. And so you don't actually have as high a ketone level. So there's a lot of variability in what that number may be. But the rule or the goal for someone with type 1 isn't so much getting to a state of producing ketones. It's actually maintaining normal glucose levels. And so diet, obviously, maybe people aren't aware of this, has the most potent impact on that. And so if you want to get into a state where you're kind of reducing a lot of this variability, idealistically, you would reduce the overall insulin load, which is the thing causing the variability. Because let's say you go into an exercise bout, Max, and you had 1 unit of insulin before that exercise. Well, who knows? Like maybe, and let's give a game example because there's more implications here. Let's say you gave 1 unit of insulin right before you went on the ice.
Yep.
And all of a sudden that insulin's not acting like 1 unit of insulin anymore because of it's acting like 3. Okay. So 1 to 3. Well, let's say that you gave yourself, you ate toast or you ate a couple bananas and you had this protein shake. You did all this traditional things that people tell you to do before exercise for people without type 1 diabetes. And you gave yourself 3, maybe 4 units of insulin. Sometimes I know some athletes will go much higher than that. And so let's say 3 units of insulin, which is a pretty conservative dose for that meal. Let's say you gave, let's be realistic, 5 for what some athletes are doing, 5. Then you go on the ice. Instead of 1 unit acting like 3, now 5 acting like 15. And so the difference in impact and variability with higher insulin doses, particularly around these periods of time where there's a lot of variability, is so much higher
Yeah.
and so much more consequential, which is why people who have type 1 diabetes are like throwing their hands up in the air, like, okay, they're almost, there's fear around exercise with some people with type 1 because of that inherent variability. But the tool is very simple. It's how can you lower the thing that induces the highest variability and uncertainty, and that's insulin. Well, nutrition
By
is the biggest.
eliminating carbs.
Well, there you go. Okay, Max went all the way there. He went full send, so to speak.
So to kind of loop back to the initial question, and
Yeah.
Cole's notes version, because I mean we've gone off on a couple of different tangents, but it was super necessary, and I love that we just did that because you just answered it so perfectly, and it makes more sense now to why I said my preparation starts a day before. Because if we're trying to eliminate the two things that are the biggest variable for my performance as a type 1 diabetic, you're looking at insulin, and what drives your insulin up, you're looking at sugar and carbohydrates. So take away that one, which is in my control. And to Andrew's point earlier, if you still have the energy, assuming that you're having the proper diet, you're no longer relying on those carbs that you thought you needed for the energy. So what do I do? Night before a game, you try and eat at around 7 o'clock, between 6 and 7. And that's every meal that I'm having is like basically on the whole food diet essentially. So I try and stick to like clean ingredients and clean food. Avoid all the other processed stuff because that's when you get the question marks that Andrew talks about, and we'll always touch on that stuff. Because then you're just playing with fire, and there's a huge question mark basically beside everything you eat. So that meal is not to get into the macros, don't need to, but it's really high in protein. There's definitely some fat in there, and the carbs that I'm having are through the salad. And typically, my go-to is sweet potato. I find the complex carb that I go with, but by choice, for fueling purposes, and just mainly mental because like I feel like I need to have something in there the night before. Just sleep like a baby. It would be sweet potato with a massive steak and a nice big salad.
And how much of the sweet potato are you actually having, Max? Because a lot of people would have like a whole sweet potato, or
So I'm having between a quarter and half a sweet potato. So
it's
not
a very prescriptive amount at a very
correct. And one
strategic
day
time.
we'll actually show you the printout. I don't mind sharing that. I just don't have it on me right now. I'll actually show you guys a printout of my 24 hours leading up to a game. So you can see what I do. And again, like I'm not carrying this handout around with me because I've done it. I do it 82 games a year. So I got a pretty good sense for what I got to eat when I got to eat it. Breakfast, which is done at the rink. We have a great culinary staff there, whether it's at the practice rink or the game rink. It varies on the time of the year actually, but it's either 2 or 3 eggs. Sometimes just scrambled, usually cooked with butter. Super clean, salt and pepper, nothing really added to that. Definitely don't. I used to have ketchup on eggs, which a lot of people get grossed out about that. But once I met Andrew, I realized, oh my God, there's a lot of sugar in ketchup. So I obviously avoided that. Gassed that a while ago. So it's just basically a couple eggs. Scrambled is my go-to, but once in a while I'll have over easy. And then 2 to 3 slices of bacon, depending on, again, what point of the year we're in. And that's basically it for breakfast. Half an avocado. So right now our plan's a little bit different because I'm trying to do certain things in my off-season training protocol, but this is in season, so we'll stick to that. So half an avocado, 2 to 3 slices of bacon, and 2 to 3 eggs. Super clean, super simple, every single day. Breakfast is my favorite meal, truly. I love bacon and eggs. I could eat it every meal for the rest of my life. Andrew laughs about it. But yeah, I love it. So that's my favorite one. Go on the ice. Well, sorry, we have like a meeting, whether it's power play meeting or penalty kill meeting, 5-on-5 meeting in the morning. We'll have an optional skate typically in Toronto with our coach. Craig Berube is very much so like, how do you feel? Get what you need kind of thing, which is fantastic. I love skating. The skate itself isn't taxing like nearly enough to.
How long is it, Max?
The skating for me, like I always gauge it on like if it's less than 50 minutes, it's not going to have that big of I'm not going to have that big of a response. So it's usually around that 50-minute mark. And it's all like one-on-one skill stuff and getting my hands going, work on the shot a little bit.
For someone listening, how would it compare to a walk, a run where you can't talk, 'cause it's hard enough where you can't talk, to a sprint?
Yeah.
Where in that
So
category?
so for me, as a pro hockey player that's played hockey since I was 2, I'm 30 now. It's like a walk. If you don't know how to
Got it.
play hockey and played for 28 years, might feel a little more like a run, or a confusing run, trying to stay on ice.
Okay. So
But
it's like a, it's
for
very
me,
low
it's a
intensity.
walk. It's very, very low intensive. It's kind of mindless. It's more just, I mean, I always refer to it as just, I got to feel the puck a little bit in the morning. And it helps me sleep as well. So, and it breaks up my day a little bit. So anyways, going back to wake up, you got your little warm up, you got, the meetings, all that stuff, with your breakfast before that. Then you go on the ice for a morning skate. Get off. I'll usually start doctoring out my equipment, get some sticks ready, cut a couple new sticks. Check in with the equipment guys, hang out. Sometimes get some treatment at the rink from our awesome athletic staff, or trainers there. They're all great. I mean, we got the best staff in the league. It's makes our job much easier. So get some of that stuff done. That's about 45 minutes to an hour of stuff. Now we're usually at about between 11:30 and noon, give or take. At that point, then I'll start to make my way over to the kitchen at our rink. And at that point, that's when I would have my pregame meal, which is a huge, huge salad with some olive oil and some balsamic vinegar on there. Not much, because even that, obviously, if you overdo it, that's going to have a bit of a impact on your glucose levels. So that's a big salad. That salad usually consists of just some sort of mixed green. So there's usually spinach, arugula, and just like a spring mix vibe with cucumber. Gave you the dressing already. That is huge. So like it's a big portion of my pregame meal. Back to the sweet potato. They have like these little wedges. So it's about 3, which would again be about half a sweet potato, give or take. Then I do love chicken. I know some people don't like chicken. I'm a big fan. I don't like getting too heavy in terms of the protein on a game day. It just makes me feel a little bit like lethargic kind of thing. So like I would love to have a steak, but I opt for the chicken. My gut handles it well, feel good. So you're looking at chicken, sweet potato, massive salad. I'll throw about half a cup of broccoli on there. Um, and what else is on there? Some other like veg, like, and if it's veg, it's like cauliflower kind of thing, or anything that kind of along the same lines of broccoli. Like there's nothing that's gonna really drive my blood sugar up at all. So that's lunch.
So to on that, so you're having a protein source, probably a little on the leaner side because you feel heavy if you have a lot of fat before game, and then
Yep,
you're having vegetables usually in the more fibrous forms. And if you do have any that are any starchy form, they're usually the more slower digesting forms in very prescriptive smaller amounts. Am I capturing that
correct.
right? Okay.
Correct. I guess, I mean, the main thing is you don't need to eat as much as you think you do. And you still get the same response in terms of energy and focus, actually even more so if you eat less, in my opinion. So I try not to overdo it. What else? And then like if I did want to incorporate some fat, again, it changes throughout the year. Avocado is just always my go-to. So I'll have the other half of the avocado that I would have had in the morning. And then after that, I go home. I drive home. It takes me about, I don't know, 20 minutes to get home. Chill out here, play with my dog. I got 2 cats too. By that point, it's been about 45 minutes to an hour after I ate. Like to think my digestive system's kind of taken over, and now it's nap time. My favorite time of the day. I love to sleep better than anyone. Some people call me a professional sleeper. And I'll pass out from anywhere from 90 minutes to 100 kind of thing. So you're looking at about an hour and a half. And for me, I'm not going to get into like the whole nap science thing because I'm not a big believer in that. The data that's out there, I think it's super specific to each individual. Try every amount of nap and it'll vary. Sometimes someone can say, oh, 2 hours is what you need to do. Sometimes it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Oh, you don't want to go over this REM cycle because then you'll be like groggy and all this shit. Okay,
Well,
whatever. Sure.
let me comment on that for a second.
Okay, go
What
ahead.
they're doing in the NHL is so not a normal schedule. So like when someone's
Yes.
like, "Oh, like I have yeah, you wouldn't want to take an hour and a half nap." Like, okay, yeah, you probably wouldn't, except that you might not have flown across the country and got like virtually no sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's totally different. Totally different.
Well, and I don't think I was ever really clear when I explained to Andrew my schedule until he actually started to like be like on a weekly call with me, like, holy shit, dude. Because you're starting to like, get the compounding effect of all the different travel, like you said, the games, multiple games. Who knows? Maybe you've just been sick or injured. All that stuff starts to compound, and then it's just that's when you have to start tweaking on the go. That's why building your toolbox in the off season is super super valuable. Okay, so the nap is there. And listen, there's been times where I've napped for 2.5, 3 hours on a game day. That's if I just had a back to back and I got back at 4 in the morning and didn't feel well all day and blood sugar issues and whatever. So I'm just like, I'm just trying to catch up on as much sleep as I can. And then I have my protocol to wake up. So get up. I'm a big red light guy too. I do a lot of that stuff throughout the day. I think it's great for your circadian rhythms. So that helps me quite a bit. I don't drink coffee, which throws people for a loop sometimes. I've never actually had a cup of coffee in my life, ever. So I wake up and it's more of like, okay, let's get moving, let's get outside. Whether it's cold out in Toronto, Canada, or just see the sunlight, it wakes me up. I have like a supplement stack that I'll take before the game. Um, Gets me locked in. Sometimes I'll actually do even like an activation here. I have like a guy that he didn't live with me, but during the season he's here quite a bit. My girlfriend always says we have a guy that lives with us, but he's fantastic. His name's Tony, and he's more of like a massage therapist, ART guy, but he's also a strength coach as well. So he'll put me through some activation drills. Sometimes we'll do some stretches and just turn the nervous system on, get things firing. After that, get my suit on, head to the rink. Get to the rink for a 7 o'clock game, usually about 4:30, 4:45. I mean, the deadline is 5 o'clock. I tend to push it as close as I can to five, just because I do a lot of my work in the morning to prepare, and I like getting there and just kind of like being like clock, just like bang it out. All the stuff I have to do. I don't like just sitting around. I feel like my brain starts to wander, and I'm not quite as locked in or quite as dialed. So being there as close to the 5 o'clock mark for me is actually pretty important. At that point, I'm kind of in game mode. Got a few more meetings, getting your gear ready. You're taping your sticks, you're lacing your skates, organizing all the stuff you need to get. The staff, like I said earlier, gets all your supplements, all your drinks, and all that good stuff ready to go. And I didn't really touch on that. I don't really drink anything other than water with electrolytes on a game day. There's no juice. There's no real protein shake at that point until Andrew and I started to realize, okay, why am I going low when I'm doing my off ice warm up, which would be about 6 o'clock? Like, it makes no sense. And we adjusted some stuff and okay, what about just like half a scoop of a protein powder? And we messed around with that type of protein powder. And then we, okay, have this type of insulin with this protein powder. So we did that. And all of a sudden that was just like this. So then all of a sudden my game was starting and I was in a spot where I was like, all right, this is as good as it's going to get. Now we just got to maintain it here. If I was a little bit lower, I'd incorporate a quarter to half a banana. If I need a quick hit, if you're in Canada, Rockets are my go-to. I was never a Rockets fan, but it's pure dextrose, gets in your system right away, and it won't linger, and it's out. So get you back to a position where you're good to go, and you can treat it or perform whatever you got to do, and then you don't have to worry about it keep climbing and climbing and climbing like other stuff that you would treat with. So that's kind of like what I got for a game day. Post game, that's where it gets a little complicated. There's always an immediate shake after, which is mainly protein, but there are some carbs that go with that. Depending on how the game went, how many minutes I had, I have to always adjust to that.
Just to confirm for users that or listeners, that is highly dependent on glucose levels and insulin,
Correct.
And time on ice and all these other factors to adjust according to glucose needs at that time.
Yeah. Those are the variables again that are out of my control, but as long as I have a plan for each of those individual things, I'm ready to go. That changes too if I'm at home or if I'm on the road, right? So on the road, you're usually in a hurry to get out of there, so you don't have quite as much time to recover and do your whole post-game routine. So you gotta be pretty locked in with that. Then you're on a plane, you're eating your post-game meal in the air. So that's totally separate. But just on a normal game day for me at home, I would typically do a little bit of a cool down after I have my shakes. I'm not worrying about crashing. That's a quick little bike ride. Sometimes we'll have a lift after a game. During the year, it's almost every game. There's always a lift post game. But those are quick. It's 20 minutes and you're out of there. After that, I'm big into the contrast. So you're jumping the cold tub. hot tub back and forth a few times. If some guys are getting flushed out on the massage table, some guys are doing some needle work, some guys are doing some modality work with like all the lasers and ultrasound and all this stuff. So it depends what's going on that given day. And I mean, what you're nursing for injury wise and what do you got to do to get ready for the next game. Because once that game's over, you're already in, okay, when's the next one? Is it the next day? Is it 2 days from now? Is it 3 days from now? Is it on the road? Is it at home? Like we have practice tomorrow. Do we not have practice? All that stuff kind of bounces in and out of your head. But yeah, that would be my game day. I know it's a long-winded answer, but
So,
that's
so if
pretty
we
high
want,
level.
so if we want to bring it back to summary, so what you're saying is that you start 24 hours before with preparing your mindset for what's going to happen on the most important period, which is when you perform, and that
Correct.
goes to at night before. You'll have a foundation of a specific amount of protein, around for you. That's around 50 grams, and then you have something that's more of a fibrous forms of carbohydrates. And then you have fat as the kind of energy needs for that meal. And then a prescriptive amount of, let's say, something that's more slower carbohydrates in form, like sweet potatoes. But it's very prescriptive in the amount you would have. And it's also at a time
Yeah.
when it's less risky to do that, right? Because you're not about to perform.
Yeah.
You can be more precise with that, and there's not as many consequences to that. Then you go into the next morning, you'll just have basically what is a very low carbohydrate, almost pure protein and fat based meal. Then you'll go into the exercise you do. Then the post exercise you may have is very much like the night before, but with less fat and the protein because you just don't feel as good for performing. Again, with precision around the amount of foods you're having. Then
Yeah.
right before the game, you'll have a very prescriptive amount of what is needed to minimize the amount of insulin you need, but actually maximize maintaining glucose levels in a steady state. And there's different tools and strategies I know you've done, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's a minimalist amount of insulin that you describe and that you use with a prescriptive amount of protein, because a lot of people think I need carbs, but the carbs are going to get in and out of your system they're going all in within 30 minutes, whereas protein will actually digest over not digest, but it'll be digested, but it will actually maintain glucose levels over a 3 to 4 hour period, which allows for these kind of longer duration warm up and exercise bouts to be maintained, which is actually like a kind of a trick
Yeah.
in these environments. So low insulin, but also a trick to maintain glucose levels over that period of time.
Yep.
And then post exercise, you kind of default, or post game, you kind of default to what's available. If it's a game, you have what's at the rink, which is more of a foundational protein, and whatever is necessary to maintain glucose levels, higher or lower glucose or carbs with that, only dependent on glucose levels at that time and needs. And then you go for the meal, you idealistically would do something that you can do, which is the kind of protein foundation, fibers, carbs, and then a prescriptive amount of carbohydrates at eating. But it's highly dependent on what you have access to, obviously, because when you're traveling and
Yep.
other things, you have to adapt on the fly, literally, pun intended, because sometimes you're flying
Yep.
like
Literally.
half the season to do that. So
Yep.
did I summarize that well?
Perfect. And the last thing I'll add is Andrew taught me all the stuff that I'm about to tell you is super valuable. The type of insulin and where you inject it. If you're on a pump, I highly suggest when you have meals on a game day to go kick it old school. So leave the pump as is, let the basal do its thing. Don't have to touch the pump at all. But for me, like I said, I'm on the loop system. I wear an Omnipod. I've got the Dexcom G7. So that's separate. And when I have my breakfast, I have X amount of insulin. That insulin is actually regular insulin. So insulin, what is it, Novo R or whatever?
No,
Uh,
Novolin R and Homolin R,
Novo
which
R, yes.
a lot of users are probably unfamiliar, but this is like the first type of insulin that was ever discovered.
Yeah, reason I do that is as I told you guys, it's mainly protein, so I don't have to worry about like a Fiasp or a faster acting insulin that would actually cause me to go low. This seems to like keep me super stable with the high protein, higher fat breakfast. And as I told you guys, I'm trying to get through that whole morning part of exercise, whether it's an off ice activation or a morning skate. I just want to get through that as clean as I can, feel good, and that's it. When I get to my pregame meal, that's when there is, I am going to use the Fiasp. It's not quite as much protein. But it's for the sweet potato, and that is so my shoulder.
Which
So I
means
don't
intramuscular for
correct.
the
So sub Q would be in my belly, and IM would be in my delt. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to worry about any sort of high when I'm napping, because that'll impact my nap, which will impact my ability to prepare for the game. And I just find that's more in and out a little quicker. Don't have to worry about it starting to drift up. So that's that. Before the game, that's where it gets super interesting. And we won't get into too much depth of like me playing around with the pump and stuff because that's where it gets confusing. But in simple terms, the most consistent thing that we've relied on is okay, Max, the protein shake works. We know that. Let's just have half a scoop or a scoop of protein and see what happens to your blood. There's been times where all of a sudden we've done that with zero insulin whatsoever, and I just go right into my off ice warm up, which can be somewhat taxing, and it just stays right here. There's been times where, depending on the schedule, it tends to go up a little bit. There's even been times where it goes a little bit low. So at that point, I've had to kind of make like a game time decision. Okay, is there a need for a little bit of insulin here with the shake? Is there a need for half a banana or a quarter banana? Like all that stuff. Like again, I'm prepared for whatever's going to happen. But again, going back to it's what you eat and it's what you're putting in your body with, whether it's through your mouth or through insulin and the different types of insulin methods. I would highly suggest staying away from your insulin pump in terms of giving boluses. Andrew taught me that obviously it starts to pool, so you're not necessarily fully aware of how much is getting in, how quickly, and all that stuff. And that just it it didn't sit well with me. There's too much of a question mark there. The IM and sub-Q injections were very much so okay. There's 1 unit, there's 2 units, boom, that's in there. We know what's going to happen. Know how my body's going to react. Let's stick to that. So just wanted to finish off by saying that.
Well, so for everyone, everyone's very different in their own responses and how they may do, but there's some fundamentals that everyone can essentially learn from and take away. But, these are just our experiences. It may or may not apply to other people, but it is really important to appreciate that there are some unique strategies that a lot of people are just unaware of that many people do that are quite effective at managing, and we'll kind of share those transparently in what we do. Although again, it's not clinical advice. Everyone does their own thing. Everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah, I'm not your doctor, so don't just take what I said and do it. But you can tweak it and try it out and whenever you want. That's just what I do. It works for me. And I've worked pretty hard on that to help formulate that over the years through work with my doctors and people that have a lot of experience, including guys like Andrew that have taught me so much.
Well, so, and on that note, Max, we can say, we'll end it on that note, and we'll just say, for those who are interested in learning more, maybe we'll have a completely separate episode about the difference and nuances of the various types of insulin, how those insulins tend to work, and also
absolutely.
the variability around where you inject them, when you inject them, and what the implications of that might be.
Love it, bro. That was fun. Thank you.
All right, man.
See you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to episode 1 of season 2 of the In Range podcast. If you want to see more, check out season 1, where Max and I discuss our journeys with type 1 diabetes, nutrition, exercise, and more. Also, check out Max on Instagram @Max and myself @Andrew Koutnik PhD. And check out the newsletter at andrewkoutnikphd.com, where you'll find key insights and resources for those looking to optimize health, master disease management, and achieve peak performance.